Monday, June the 17th. Is there any changes to the agenda by staff?
None from staff, Your Worship.
All right, councillors, do we have any changes or additions to the agenda? Seeing none, disclosure of interest. Councillors, any disclosure of interest? Seeing none, we'll go right on to our agenda. Item 4, presentations. Welcome, Mr. Laird. Nice to see you here this morning. Thank you for coming to talk to us about the public art project at Alexander and Lakeshore.
Good morning, Mayor Harrison and councillors. Thank you very much for this opportunity to present a bit of a dream. Hopefully our community will be able to embrace it. Some of you folks, I've talked to a couple of councillors already. We can see in our presentation here that that's the existing sign. And earlier this year we removed the patio, the planter, so that we could see what the footing was. We're going to have to do a bit more work there, but I apologize for how long that's been exposed. That was never my intent to leave it open this long. So the rationale for making a change is the railway underpass is, if you will, the catalyst. Got a number of us thinking about the use of that space in front of the mall. A chunk of it's ours and a chunk of it is the city's. And one of the tenants was adamant that the sign was finished and should come down, and certainly it does need to be upgraded, etc. And it's probably redundant. It's very large, and you have to look up to read it. I don't believe anybody reads it anymore. Mm-hmm. So we engaged Warren Welter, who has been very successful in our community with other projects. And with a bit of discussion, he came up with the idea of the treble clef. Now, I'm not sure how you define what salmon arm is, because some folks have said, well, it doesn't represent salmon arm. But I feel that it does. And the reasons are that we have a very large artistic community. We have, as I've listed there, musicians, artists, writers, and artisans of all stripes. I couldn't put a paintbrush up there, couldn't put a quill up there. And when we think of artisans, whether they're leather workers or pottery or even our huge tech community, they all listen to music when they're working. I mean, everybody's walking around now with earbuds. So I was very enthusiastic about Warren's suggestion of a treble clef, because I think our community can get behind it, and I would like it, and I'm speaking of and I shouldn't do that, but I'm hoping the community can get behind this as a symbol that represents all of us. Like I say, I could have done a salmon, we could have done a grebe, but they'd be harder to do. And when we look at what other communities have done, Duncan has the largest hockey stick, I believe. A place, Kipling, Saskatchewan, has a paperclip. There's a 40-foot orange in Montreal, and there's a massive axe in New Brunswick. But nowhere could I find a treble clef. This is a G clef. And there was a big treble clef in Knoxville, Tennessee, which was taken down, and it was stylized. This one here, I've taken a piece of strapping off a load of lumber, and I've brought that here today to show you folks how this could be done. So it is going to be a piece of art, sculpture. If it were a sign, it would have a flat face on both sides and maybe be 12 inches thick. So it'd have no aesthetic appeal, if you will. Whereas this I think could be quite elegant. So we're struggling with it. I'll get to that a bit. Anyway, one person thought it was an ampersand. So maybe some of you have to look up what an ampersand is, but the individual was graduated in a commercial situation as opposed to a musical education. So we forgave them. It's very difficult to come up with an original idea. So I believe that we have an opportunity here because this is a happy symbol and it's located at the end of a street where we want to have events periodically. The patio improvements, I've worked with engineering on this and we've come up with a plan together. So the upper right circle will be what the patio stones look like. They will be different to the existing ones. The existing ones are a brick shape. And in the lower right, that is what the block wall will be. I'll show you in a moment how high it is. It's very low. We're going to put a number of seats around like that, and we will also have patio tables with umbrellas. I'm working now to get water to that position because it has to be potable. I had hoped to use the city water that's there, but that's not possible. We will preserve the Christmas tree mounting point and the electrical because I think that's very important to us also. The piano, it's kind of interesting. It's not an original idea. We know that it's done around the world. There's 5 currently in Kelowna in what they call their Pianos in the Park program. But I've had 1 offer to maintain the piano and 2 offers to provide a piano. This is a plan view. Now, I don't know how important it is to you folks, but it was important to engineering and that's why we produced this drawing. And I have one of these little rascals here. I don't know if he's going to work up there. He does not. So the seating that I showed you, if you look in the plan view, you'll see that there is 5 of those seats around the outside. The building is at the top of your drawing. The existing 8-foot sidewalk remains. And then instead of the raised planter, this will be flat. At the bottom of the drawing, there is a curve. That will be a very simple railing just to demarc the patio. There is 8 feet between that and your curb, so there will be still plenty of room for a sidewalk past there. We will move the existing garbage can over to your left, and the recycle bin will also be moved. The watering station will be on the right. And again, I don't know how important all of this is to you folks. But anyway, that's, I guess we're showing this to show that we have thought it out. We can come back to any of these and answer questions as we go along. This is showing all the elevations and the cross section. The wall will be about 14 inches high. So whereas before the planter was 42 inches high, because we're going to come off the curb level, and we've got a swale that runs from left to right so that we have drainage. But when you will see very little wall. It'll start from nothing and just go up to 14 inches at the sidewalk. So here we have a blow up of the clef itself. So it is calligraphy. So it's a calligraphy script. The drawing on the right is the initial drawing that we will use for construction. That will have to be engineered, and we're working on that right now. This is not a sign. I want to stress the fact that it's a piece of art. So, I'm now an expert on G clefs. If anyone wants to ask a question about that, I can tell you. I don't know if I mentioned already, they had one in Knoxville, Tennessee, and it wasn't attractive. It wasn't real. It was an artistic impression of one. It has since been taken down. I couldn't find one anywhere in the world, especially one this big. It's going to be 32 feet high. So that's to scale. If you see the bottom of it, it starts basically at the roof line of the building and goes up above it. It's going to weigh about 1,500 pounds because it's 1/2-inch aluminum by 2 feet wide. It's going to be quite difficult to twist the aluminum to make the bends that we see there. It's one thing to do it even with this material, but it's something else to do with rigid aluminum. The boys believe they can do it. Adam and Chris Meikle are helping me with this. They both help me with the butterflies and with the giraffe. So We believe that we're going to be successful. We're probably going to have to bolt it together. We haven't decided if we're going to make those bolts obvious or if we can actually conceal them. It will be powder coated. We're looking into whether or not we can embed glass beads like one does for the highway so that it reflects at night, the center line. We don't know if we can do that because this has to go into quite a large tank for the powder coating. So it's a challenge. So again, this is all being done locally. We have a local engineer, we have the Miko brothers. My own people have contributed a lot with drawings and with the physical work that we're going to do. Community support, Downtown Salmon Arm has voted in favor of this and they will provide a letter. Roots and Blues and the Art Gallery and EDS have all been informed. I say informed because I did not ask for a letter. They were all supportive, but I did not go and make presentations at any of those places. Maintenance is always a concern for anything like this. So the patio pavers are 3.1 inch thick. They'll be grouted with a polymetric sand mixture, and Rampton will do the work. He's also very good at his job. Again, repeating myself, 1/2 inch thick aluminum, powder coated. I've talked to engineering staff and planning as we went along, and we can probably have the patio done by the 1st of July. The treble clef's going to take a little bit longer. So, and that's the first bar of O Canada in the staff. That's all aluminum. Like I say, it'll be 1,200 pounds. So from an engineering perspective, we're going to weigh everything that we take down off there when we take it down, because we don't know what weight is on it. But the real situation is that existing face is so massive and taking such a load from wind, we don't believe there'll be any problem with the existing footings, because this will not have any resistance. We can calculate the area, but it's a bit hard to determine because of nothing is ever facing the wind the same way, if you know what I mean. Yep. So anyway, it's going to be a fun project. There's a lot of enthusiasm with everybody who's participating in the work side. And if council can see their way clear to support this, we would like to go ahead with it. So I would take any questions.
Thank you very much, Bill. Council, questions for Mr. Laird this morning? Councillor Wallace-Richmond.
Thanks, Your Worship. Thank you, Bill, for your time and your big ideas. You're on continuing to share these big ideas with our city. I am 100% in support of this, and I thank you for taking the time to come and see me about it. You know, public art provides so many benefits: a gathering space, landmarks, identification, unique attributes. I mean, these are all the things that the EDS branding study revealed that would be important for the future of the city. And I think this is a great one. I think the piano is especially wonderful because it would create a sound garden in effect where people could gather and play piano or visit. And if we think about the changes that are going to happen to the city with the Ross Street underpass and the potential redevelopment of Askews and the Innovation Center, I mean, it could really be an apex of a space where, and I can't wait to see the view coming down Alexander, because I too work on that street and I'm a bit tired of that sign, but this is a rather large project to replace it. So very supportive, encourage council to, these are the exact sort of things that a small city with big ideas needs, and I hope we can support you in the next steps. Thank you.
Yeah, that sign is not centered on Alexander, which causes a great deal of distress to those of us who look at those kind of things all the time. We will do the treble clef and the staff. The treble clef will be the orange color, and the staff will be the blue color. So again, this is right along the idea of small city, big ideas, because at 32 feet high, we think we'll have a run at getting this into the Guinness Book of Records. And hopefully if Salmon Arm can embrace this, as I say, I want it to be something that all of the artisans can get behind. That I know it's a musical symbol, but the link is the fact that everybody listens to music. And O Canada is something that we aren't thinking enough about right now in this day and age, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, the Raptor, what's the folks in? Uh-oh, I'm not a basketball fan. There's a big thing happening right now right, in Toronto. And I think it's important for us to celebrate our country.
Absolutely.
So,
Councillor Wallace-Richmond, if perhaps the CEO would suggest a motion, would you be willing, we'll just hear what the suggestion might be and see if you're comfortable moving
Yes, that would be that council direct staff to prepare a report on the options for the proposed public art structure.
I would make that motion.
Do we have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Lavery. Thank you. I think, Councillor Wallace-Richmond, did you want to speak further to the motion, or you?
No, I mean, it's a storytelling opportunity, and it tells a great big story. And I think we need to embrace these bold ideas. I know they can be scary and they have to be engineered, and but that story needs to be told. And once it's up, then we'll have to help you tell that story as well. So, thank you.
Thank you. Other speakers? Councillor Lindgren.
Yeah, no questions, but Bill, I love this idea of the patio and the outdoor space, and I think it's a great addition to the downtown. I hope it's a place where people actually just come and gather, and that there are musical events happening there, and reasons for people to come downtown after 5 o'clock at night. So, and I'm happy to hear it's orange, because I hate this red color. So, well done.
yeah, we're a bit concerned about the piano. We don't know how it's going to survive we're going to put a roof over it, but we don't know how it's going to survive in either weather or up against vandalism. Other people do it, so we'll just have to try. And we don't want to take away from Ross Street. That wasn't our goal. It's just that something has to be done in front of this building.
Councillor Lavery. Oh, sorry, Councillor Lavery, if you'd press again, please.
Thank you, Council. Thank you, Mayor Harrison. Thanks, Bill, for this. I'm just fully supportive. I just want to take the opportunity to use these two words, duly noted.
Councillor Lavery's been waiting 8 years to use that. Thank you. Councillor Wallace-Richmond, do you want to?
Just on the matter of the piano, I mean, it is done North America wide. I know there's a way. And if we can put a 32-foot treble clef on a building, we can certainly figure out how to make that piano work. And I too have one that you're welcome to use.
We've had a number of offers.
Thank you. Thanks, Bill, for bringing this idea. I'm a sports guy, and we do a lot for sports in the city. And so I'm really pleased to see us recognize the artistic piece. And I think you're right. Although I'm a sports guy, I love music too. So yeah. I think we can all embrace it. It reminds me a bit of when I was in, I think it was New Brunswick. There's a city who has a big fiddle.
Yes, that's correct. There is a massive fiddle.
And you should see the people, that come to see that fiddle.
Yeah.
From everywhere. And I think this could be similar.
That's what we're hoping. The challenge is that it's too far off the ground to have your picture taken in front of it. They'll have to stand in the middle of Alexander. But I wanted to get it up high so it could be seen.
It's okay, because I want to shut Alexander off to traffic anyways. So don't.
For events is great, but we're going to discuss whether it's forever or not.
No, it doesn't take forever to take a picture, so I think we can work it out. Anyway, the other thing that I like, you said a water bottle filling station.
Yes.
There, I think
dog watering.
That's great. We need that in downtown. I think that's a great asset. I like the color. I like the idea. Thank you for bringing it to us.
My pleasure. Thank you for the support.
Councillor Lindgren?
Thanks. A couple questions. One just came up because you said dog watering station. Could you make sure that there is an eye somewhere that you can hook the leash to? Because currently places that have a place with a dog watering station outside their store have nowhere to tie your dog up while you go inside. And that leaves me tying my dog to a light post, which puts him within range of being hit by a car when he wanders to the end of his leash. So if there's a hook that you can attach the leash to, that's really helpful for us dog owners. My other comment is about the piano, and this is for council, I guess. How does this relate or conflict, I'm not sure which, to our no panhandling, no busking bylaw? And what's going to happen when people sit down to play the piano, and how is that different than playing guitar?
It doesn't conflict at all because the bylaw doesn't prohibit busking in any way. The only thing the bylaw does is prohibits nuisance. So there's no conflict at all in any way.
So what happens if the neighbors complain about the piano playing?
It's far enough away from residences.
Yeah, I don't anticipate that taking place. Yeah. There is a misunderstanding, Councillor Lindgren, with the bylaw, and I was on the radio talking to Patrick about it because he misunderstood it as well. But if people read the bylaw, it's very clear that there is no restriction to busking in the downtown. It's not about busking. Other speakers? Councillor Flynn.
Thank you. I like it. I will vote in support and hope that we can have this done as quickly as possible.
Thank you. Any other speakers? All right, I will call the question. All those in favor? Thank you very much.
Just like to show you one other thing. So we're going to do a selfie station on the side of the Innovation Center. We're just struggling getting the right paint so it won't fade. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. We have some concerns about what we're doing as far as executing it, but we'll get on it right away.
People will come get their photo taken there, Mr. Laird.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, they will.
That
The
is great.
Innovation folks are very excited.
Okay.
By the way, Bill, I drove by Westgate a number of times this weekend going out to the lake, and it looks amazing. The colors, it's just vibrant, and great job on that as well.
Appreciate that. I've emptied my garage now. There's no more extra paint. If it was poured one color, it would have been one color. Thank you all.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move along our agenda. We're on item 5.1, Development Variance Permit Application Number VP 496, Varga, 451 10th Avenue Southeast, parcel line setbacks. We have a proposed motion. Is there a mover for that motion? Councillor Eliason, Councillor Flynn seconds. I'll ask the administrator to read the motion.
Moved by Councillor Eliason, seconded by Councillor Flynn, that the Development and Planning Services Committee recommends to Council that VP 498 be authorized for issuance for Parcel A, Plan 5725 to vary zoning bylaw 2303 as follows. Reduce the minimum building setback from the front parcel line from 6 to 2.5 meters to allow for an existing single-family dwelling, and reduce the minimum building setback from the exterior side parcel line from 6 to 4 meters to allow for a single-family dwelling on the proposed eastern parcel.
Thank you. Director of Development Services.
Thank you, Worship. The property under application is addressed at 451 10th Avenue Southeast. It's owned by John Varga, who has applied to subdivide the property into two. The proposed subdivision plan is attached as Appendix 1. That application has gone through the review process with staff, and it is related to this application because when the property is turned into two lots, the existing house would be sited too close to the front parcel line, and on the proposed Lot 2, a variance would be needed to create a suitable building envelope. So the variance being requested is to decrease the minimum setback from 6 meters to 4.5 meters along this exterior parcel line, and to reduce the setback from the front parcel line from 6 meters to 2.5 meters for the existing house. As mentioned, the subdivision application has been reviewed. The PLA has gone out to Mr. Varga. The proposal qualifies for the infill exemption of the servicing bylaw, and staff are recommending support of these variances.
Great, thank you very much. Mr. Varga, would you like to come forward and speak to us? Good morning to you.
Good morning. My name is John Varga, and I'm just actually here to answer any questions council has.
Super, thank you very much. I will pass it over to council and see if we have questions. Councillor Flynn, do you have a question?
No, you just didn't turn.
Okay. Are there any questions for Mr. Varga? All right, it looks like not at this time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll see if there's any questions for staff. Council, any questions for staff? Councillor Lavery.
Thank you, Mayor Harrison, and just, I'm making an assumption here, but just a confirmation from staff that the exits, would that be a shared exit on to 10th?
Your worship, in this case, I had the same question, but the city engineer is not concerned about having two accesses to each parcel because eventually 10th Avenue will be not a through road to Shoemaker Hill. In the future, there'll be a cul-de-sac further to the west here, and the traffic should be minimized, so there is no concern with having two accesses.
Thank you. As a follow-up to that, though, then given a second access, that will be on 10th as opposed to 5th?
Both accesses would be off 10th.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions for staff? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All those in favor? Thank you very much. So that variance hearing would be the next council meeting?
Next Monday night at 7 p.m.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll see you then. Okay, we'll move forward to 5.2. Councillor Flynn, you are declaring a conflict there. Thank you. It's development. Variance permit application number 497. It's the wood shop. 4921 Auto Roads, Southeast, fire hydrant requirement. We have a proposed motion. Is there a mover for that motion? Councillor Lindgren, thank you. Councillor Wallace-Richmond seconds. I'll have the administrator read the motion for us.
Moved by Councillor Lindgren, seconded by Councillor Wallace-Richmond, that the Development Planning Services Committee recommends to Council that VP 497 be authorized for issuance for Lot 1, Plan 41074 to vary servicing bylaw 4163 as follows. Waive the requirement to install a fire hydrant to the minimum 90-meter spacing.
Thank you. Director of Development Services.
Your worship, this application is for the wood shop, millwork and joinery incorporated building out the industrial park, 4921 Auto Road Southeast. The owners are Travis Johnson and Stuart Bird. They applied for a building permit not too long ago for a 2,000 square foot addition to the existing building. That building permit triggered the subdivision and development servicing bylaw. And in this case, the bylaw requires a fire hydrant to be placed along the other side of the street. There are some maps in the package showing the property, Auto Road, and this map here shows the two closest hydrants to the property. There is one hydrant within 45 meters of the building, the existing building, and then there's another fire hydrant further to the southeast at the intersection down here. Because there is a gap here, that is what is triggering the bylaw requirement in this case. That's all I have to say at this point, except for the fact that this was actually a very tough one from my perspective, having to present this report to you. I have a report from the city engineer recommending that the variance be denied, and then there's commentary from the fire chief recommending, well, I'm not sure what it's recommending exactly, but it's saying that there is no concern from a fire protection perspective.
Great, thank you very much. And I see those staff members are here too. Council may have questions for them. Mr. Bird and Mr. Johnston, good morning. Did you want to come forward and add on to what the director had to say?
Morning, everybody.
Good to see you both.
So I'm Stuart, this is Travis. You might have to escape on a momentary notice. I think I don't know the weather a little bit this morning, so. But thanks for taking the time to listen to us. We really appreciate it, you guys. This is kind of a difficult one, we understand, because, you know, when somebody applies for a permit, there's things that trigger, as you said, right? So we're not really denying the fact that the bylaw states we need a fire hydrant, and their fire hydrants need to be within the distance of each other that they're required. But what we are kind of trying to fight is the fact that it's a little bit overkill and it's creating a bit of a hardship for some of the small businesses that feel like we are fully covered by the fire hydrants that are in the area. I have to be honest, when we got the email, it was April the 1st. And we all kind of looked at each other and thought, that's a good April Fool's joke, because we could have balled up the email that we printed off the printer and thrown it across the street at the fire hydrant. So, again, yeah, I guess we're just here to answer any questions that you might have. And, you know, we do appreciate that bylaws and the way they're written can't make everybody happy. And, you know, that's so.
I guess on further that note too, then maybe the potential to further look at the bylaw and figure out if that's what this community needs, what the industrial park needs, what commercially we need, residentially we need. I mean, it might just open up a whole conversation about that bylaw that needs to be had.
So, you know, the other thing too is possibly if somebody's doing an addition to a building, maybe there's a scale that you need to know before you get into that. Like, you know, if you're going to do a 2,000 square foot addition, then you're required to put a fire hydrant in. Or if you're going to develop the property from bare land, then you need to put fire hydrants in. Or, you know, I just feel like it might be a good segue into talking about those kind of things. So again, if there's any questions you guys have for us, feel free.
Great,
And thank you again. Also, thank you, Sylvia, for coming out and having a look at the property. And Debbie also came out, so we'd like to say thank you to them.
And Al as well.
Yeah, that's right.
Great, thank you very much. We'll just see if there's any questions for the applicants before we open it up to questions to staff. Okay, I don't think so at this time, fellas, but we may have questions before we finish. Councillor Eliason, did you have a question for staff? Okay, go ahead.
What is the through you to staff? What is the threshold for the revitalization tax exemption for the industrial park area? 300K.
Director of Development Services.
Your worship, it's about 300,000.
Okay, so this building permit wouldn't qualify for it because it's 250.
The declared value of construction is 210,000.
Okay, so they're just shy of that way, which I think would offset this. That's my only question for this time.
Thank you. Other questions for staff? Councillor Lavery.
Yes, thanks, Your Worship. And just a general comment, thanks to the presenters as well. This is the way the process is supposed to work in one spot at one time. Everybody hears all the information at this, so I do appreciate that. Through you, Your Worship, to staff, my questions are about the bylaw itself. And so my question is, the bylaw says a frontage distance of 90 meters. Is that correct?
Your worship, that's correct.
And
It's a lineal distance.
And a secondary requirement, though, is that the frontage is of any individual lot. And it's actually interesting whether it's the residential lot in front of us or all odd-shaped lots with that little jaggy piece on the end. It maybe causes a problem a bit. That's technical planning terms, jaggy piece. Is it a secondary requirement under the bylaw that there is full front lot coverage? Because that seems to be the hang-up.
Your worship, it's part of the bylaw. It's not a secondary requirement. It is part of the bylaw.
And is that, and I don't have that bylaw in front of me, is written in the bylaw as well, that you need?
Spacing, it's all about the spacing of the hydrants. So, Your worship, if I can get my screen on, I'll just show you another example of the hydrants in the industrial park. So there are the hydrants, and that's the 90-meter radius. That's not, essentially, it shows there's gaps in certain areas, right? And the whole purpose of the bylaw is to be consistent throughout all the frontages. And so there should be consistent coverage. So if you look down on the lower end of the screen, this is the coverage that we're looking for in the industrial park. So there's a number of areas through there that have gaps. And those are the gaps that we're trying to fill. And some of them obviously are close, but it's consistent with fire underwriter survey, which requires 90-meter spacing in industrial areas, and our bylaw is consistent with that as well.
So that, actually, this is helpful as well as the other graphic that we have in front of us. But so just again, so I'm clear, so the 90-meter coverage, which leads to gaps, I fully get. Is there a requirement, other than the gap at looking at the subject property, that on the subject property, the full frontage is covered under the radius?
That's correct.
And that part is explicit in the bylaw as well? Or is it just the 90-meter gap? The 90-meter
It speaks to the 90 meters, but it requires the frontage to be covered.
Okay. So, and again, without belaboring this, Your Worship, I get the 90-meter aspect, but we don't have, that would be an interpretation then to make sure that the frontage is covered as well on the subject property? Or do we know that at this time?
I might have to defer to the engineer. Jen, can you help me with that one?
Thanks, Jen.
Through your worship, the bylaw speaks to the frontage of the parcel for all servicing requirements in the bylaw. So if it was water main, it has to cover your entire frontage of the bylaw. So any parcel anywhere for any of the requirements through the bylaw, you have to deal with your entirety of your frontage. So fire hydrants are no different. So if a portion of your frontage falls outside of the hydrant spacing, then you are required to cover that with another hydrant.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful. That's, I may have one or two more, Your Worship, but that's it for me for now.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Lavery. Other councillors have questions. Councillor Wallace-Richmond.
Thanks, Your Worship. What would happen if the property across the street also decided to make improvements? If this fire hydrant were installed, would they have to contribute to it?
If we could go back to my monitor, please. I think it would, right? No. Okay. So, Your Worship, it's first past the post.
Okay.
So if a fire hydrant was installed here within the gap, then no, this property would be covered.
Okay, and I'm asking because I noticed on the appendix, or the appendix provided, that Bowman and Dynaflex have shared the cost of a bylaw?
That's correct,
Of a
Your
fire,
Worship.
yeah.
Yes, that's correct. They've worked together to share the cost because their building permits came in relatively at the same time.
Right, right.
So that was one way of dealing with that, but they're still providing the coverage on the front.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Lavery.
Yes, thanks again for a second shot, Your Worship. Councillor Wallace-Richmond triggered another thought for me. Is that in some extension of services, we have a latecomer aspect. Do we have any latecomer aspect to this?
That's specifically for extension of water mains or sewer mains, not hydrants.
Not hydrants. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I wonder, I see the fire chief is here. Thank you for being here this morning. Do you mind just commenting on your piece of the report? That would be useful for me.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I did as well visit the property, and we do love fire hydrants. This particular, actually there's two hydrants that are in close proximity to the property in question, and certainly from a response perspective, we would have no trouble combating a fire at this business with the current fire hydrants in place. They're located somewhat ideally in that the closest one is en route to that particular building from our fire station, so it's located very well, and the other one, although it's down at the other block, would be again sufficient for us to utilize.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate that, and thank you for visiting the site. Does anyone have any further questions for the fire chief? Thank you, Chief Shirley. Appreciate it. Could we go back to that? Perfect timing. So, the little lot, I think it's 4951. Yeah, 4951 there. They didn't have to put a fire hydrant in when they did their thing?
Your worship, this corner lot
Oh,
here?
that one right there.
With that one, a variance was granted by council to not have to upgrade any of this 50th Street. As far as a fire hydrant goes, I don't recall.
I remember the 50th Street one, the variance, but they would also have had to, the requirement would have been for them to put in the fire hydrant, wouldn't it?
We can look at that, your worship, but I can tell you that the way fire hydrants have been measured over the years has not been consistent.
Okay, can I ask, the fire hydrants that are in the industrial park now, like the ones we're looking at that are on Auto Road or on 50th, who put those fire hydrants in?
Your worship, we don't have accurate records in regards to when they were put in necessarily, but I would suspect that the city would have installed them at some point.
That's what it looks like to me, because they look like they're spaced the same distance
Absolutely.
apart, so it looks like the city, when we put in the water main, put in those fire hydrants.
And your worship, when we install new water mains, we install the hydrants to our standards.
Yeah.
So over the years, the subdivision development services bylaw has changed. So depending on when this was installed, or costing, that would be another thing as well. I'm just not entirely sure of how the industrial park was developed at that time.
Right. Okay, I understand. Thank you. Council, any other questions? Councillor Eliason?
Just comments of.
Yes, comment. We're open to comments now.
Okay. I'm very familiar with your operation and the neighborhood. My uncles lived right around the corner on the north side of this for the last probably a million years, it seems. But so I've seen the development of the industrial park happen. One of the things that happens in the industrial park is not one solution solves all of the issues for the very diverse group of businesses we have out there. When we talk to the industrial park owners, some want nothing and some want everything. Some say just let me do my business, and some say give me city sewer, city storm, city everything, and we're always left in sort of a pickle as to what we do and how we prioritize our projects. You'll notice the recent paving, the recent storm upgrades out there, but and at some point it looks like we may have put in the hydrants. If this building had qualified for the industrial park tax revitalization process, which is the threshold is $300K, this is something that I would look at differently, perhaps. But in this case, I feel like there's sufficient coverage, and I know engineering staff says to us that we should put this in, and our fire chief says we shouldn't, so I understand the predicament that our planning staff is in, but in this case, I think this is a pretty sensical variance to approve. There's a fire hydrant across the street. As the city makes a plan or develops more out there, we can perhaps fund this location, because it seems to me that the mayor was correct. There should have been one required for the little welding business with the modular behind it that we approved a few years ago. And so in this situation, I will support this variance to put in the other meter, or the other hydrant.
Thank you, Councillor Eliason. Councillor Wallace-Richmond.
Thanks, Your Worship. If I could indulge in one more question?
Of course.
Thank you.
Yeah, questions aren't closed yet.
Through you to staff, is there a way to establish a reserve if the applicant were willing to make a contribution to a potential future hydrant?
I'm not sure which staff member might answer that. Engineering and Public Works.
Your worship, typically, if it is a contribution for future works, that's the only
Yeah.
mechanism that we have for that.
Okay.
But in this case, because it's a liability issue for hydrant spacing, and it's recommended by fire underwriter survey as well,
Yeah.
we would have to install it. It wouldn't be future works.
So it'd be current works and future, like if the property across the street were to change, they would have to pay a portion.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay.
I see where you're going with that question.
Yeah.
So it would be basically having both sides of the street pay for the hydrant.
Right.
In a sense, yeah. But in this case, as the city engineer mentioned, it's first past the post. Whoever's doing the development requires to do
Right.
your frontage
Yeah.
permits.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lavery.
Yes, thanks, Your Worship. And a third shot at a question actually to staff, and then some comments.
Yes.
Through you, Your Worship. How concerned, certainly the staff rationale about sticking to the 90 meters has to do with the underwriting policy. How concerned are we? I get it in the express language that's used, but are we, just to hear this, are we very concerned, are you very concerned that a gap like this with a variance, if one is to be granted, would impact the underwriting policy?
Director of Engineering and Public Works.
Your Worship, I'm concerned with the fact of variances being granted in any regard to fire hydrant spacing. And the reason for that is because the fire under survey could change, and that could change our fire rating or our fire service rating for the community. So that's why we have a standard. We surveyed a number of communities in BC, Alberta, and Saskatchewan, and they have similar standards. They're following there is differences. There are some that have larger distances for spacing for industrial areas, but not that much. And so it's basically about setting a standard. And that's what we have, and that's what we're trying to keep with. So if a variance is granted, that sets a precedent, and that's what I'm concerned about.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thanks to staff for the answer. So just in general here, and I think each case is unique, and we say that quite regularly here, but I think this is one where I'll vote forward to moving this to the next stage. But I have still much more pondering to do and weighing out the balance of the requirement versus what, in my take here right now, is the smallest variance that or the largest variance I would even consider. And so, Your Worship, at this stage right now, I think that we talked about that property just to the east, and I think it's Ladd, actually, and they've done a really nice job on their property there. And with the house, and they came back with variances and a request to put a house on the back, that we granted that. I think that might have been before the subdivision bylaw was updated, but I'm not sure about that. I think at the time. So I'll vote forward to move this forward. I will still ponder about this. Again, the balance between retaining the 90-meter policy, which is pretty important in my view, versus the size of the variance. And I would say expressly this is different than other applications that are in front of us and may come in front of us.
Thank you, Councillor Lavery. Councillor Wallace-Richmond.
Thanks, Your Worship. I too will vote to move it forward. But just to move it forward, I think there's some, I'm sensing there's some inequity here. If there are neighboring properties that have paid for fire hydrants, except their addition to their property is bigger, and therefore the percentage of the cost of the hydrant is smaller, it seems easier to bear. It also qualifies for the tax exemption, which this applicant's does not. On the other hand, I also am concerned that other properties would get a free pass. That seems like more of a financial burden on this particular project. I am intrigued by the fact that Bowman and Dynaflex did share, and I think that fire hydrants are everyone's friends, so I wonder if there's an opportunity for a conversation to check in the neighborhood and see. We need this fire hydrant according to the regulations. We would all benefit from it, certainly, and we do not want our fire rating to go down, because the cost attached to that is increased insurance premiums as well as danger. And we're assuming a fire in the industrial park would be one building at a time, but we always have to think about catastrophic events. So I'd hate for the lack of one fire hydrant to cause greater damage. So I'll think about it some more. I'd like the applicant to think about it a little bit as well, and I'll move it ahead to the next meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace-Richmond. Councillor Lindgren.
Thank you. I'm happy to vote in favor of moving this forward, and you know, anything could happen between now and then, I guess, but from what I can see from the picture now and the coverage that these hydrants are providing to the buildings that exist already, it seems to me that voting in favor of adding a hydrant is sticking to a regulation that isn't. The point of the bylaw is to meet a goal, and the goal is to provide adequate coverage to all of the industrial buildings. And I think that these hydrants as they exist now do that. I can see that there are gaps perhaps to the, I guess it's the northwest along Otto Road. Obviously there's a big gap, but adding a hydrant where this applicant would be required to add one isn't going to solve that problem. So at this point I'm leaning towards voting in favor, but I will definitely vote to move it up to the public meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Lindgren. Councillor Wallace-Richmond, you didn't want to speak again? No. Okay. Is there any other councillors wish to speak? Okay. I'll just make my comments briefly. First of all, I agree with, I think Councillor Eliason and Councillor Lindgren summarized really well kind of what I'm thinking too. I know when you go out and take a look at the site, it does seem a bit ironic that when you stand in the parking lot of this of the applicant, you're looking like right at a fire hydrant, and it seems like you can almost touch it. So I know that's got nothing to do with the 90-meter space. I will note though that the gap in between the two hydrants is in front of a open lot that has no buildings on it at all. And if there was a building put on there, then that would trigger this bylaw. Perhaps that would be the time to look at a hydrant there. The third piece that plays for me is we want to really try to encourage small business in the industrial park. And this is not a large addition that this young business is trying to do. And so an extra $15,000 to them is a lot and is somewhat prohibitive. That is not the message that I want to give. So that plays a role for me as well. So I'm certainly going to vote to move it forward to our council meeting. I will call a question in. All those in favor? Passes unanimously. So that will come up at our council meeting on next Monday. Thank you very much. You're welcome to attend there. That'll be 7 o'clock. Okay, we will move forward. Councillor Flynn's back to item 5.3, Development Variance Permit number 499, Bowman Auto 5731, Auto Road Southeast, fire hydrant requirement. And we have a proposed motion. Is there a mover and seconder for that motion? Councillor Eliason, do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Lindgren. I'll have the administrator read the motion.
Moved by Councillor Eliason, second by Councillor Lindgren, that the Development and Planning Services Committee recommends to Council that VP 499 be authorized for issuance for Lot A, Plan 28401 to vary servicing bylaw 4163 as follows. Waive the requirement to install a fire hydrant to the minimum 90-meter spacing.
Thank you very much. Director of Development Services.
Thank you, Worship. This application is very similar to the previous one. It's a property in the industrial park that applied for a building permit earlier this year at 5731 Auto Road Southeast. With this building, the value of construction is a lot less. It's $44,000 in construction value. And the estimated cost of the fire hydrant required, including 25% contingency, is approximately $16,500. And this was triggered by the building permit process. And just like the previous one, staff are recommending that the bylaw be followed, although we do understand that the fire chief with this one also has no concerns from an operational firefighting on the ground perspective.
Great, thank you very much. And is Mr. Bowman here? Do not see him. Okay, I will open up to council then. Councillor Eliason.
I was wondering if staff, through your worship, on page 37 on my agenda, the My Map, which shows the existing and the futures, if they could comment, yep, back up. There you go. Which one are we requesting that which ones are they requesting the variance on, and which one are we requesting, and which one is half bonded with Dynaflex?
Your worship, this map is, from my point of view, is not the greatest one to refer to.
Sure.
But if you look at the large map that I put in front of you on your desk, this one's a little bit more complicated too, because it is proposing a cost sharing of the hydrant that would go in front of the Dynaflex property on the Auto Road frontage. And my understanding is there's a 50% cost sharing with Tom Bowman and Dynaflex to install the hydrant on the Auto Road where the red dot is. And Dynaflex also has a building permit in, and they have to install that one there on 48th Avenue.
Okay, so the 50%'s on Auto Road that they're
Yes.
gonna share, and then Dynaflex has to put in the other one there.
That's correct, and Dynaflex's building permit value is $500,000.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank
So they're asking to waive their requirement to cost share that one, or to even put it in at all? Is that so if they don't have to put it in, Dynaflex has to put it in? Or what are they asking?
It's a good question. Thanks, Councillor Eliason. Director of Engineering and Public Works.
Your worship, I believe that if this variance is granted, that Dynaflex will also ask for a variance on their hydrant as well. On both, the 50% and their one on the other adjacent street. So this one here and this one here.
All right, that makes sense.
Thank you, Councillor Eliason. Other questions? Councillor Flynn.
Thank you, Worship. Just related to that last question and answer, before the fire chief left, I asked him about this variance, and he said, as the Director of Planning stated, he doesn't have concerns operationally for the one on Auto. I didn't get to ask him about the one on that is being stated that would be asked by Dynaflex for a variance, whether it's operationally needed. And I guess I'm struggling, and maybe that's why the previous conversation took so long, when, to me, the need for fire hydrants should be determined by the fire chief and the fire department. And if he's saying operationally they're not needed, well, maybe we need to revisit our bylaw. Now, maybe that's the discussion you guys had when I was out. But on both situations, he has said operationally they're not needed. So I guess I'm struggling a bit with our bylaw versus the actual on-the-ground needs. And I completely understand staff has to tell us to defeat this, and it's up to us. But if we allowed this variance and there isn't that 50-50 cost sharing, what you're saying is that Dynaflex will for sure ask for a variance on the other one, but I don't know the answer to operationally where that stands. Do we have a feel for that from the fire chief, or would I have to ask him that myself?
Your worship, I would suspect you would have to ask the fire chief, but I think you'd get the same answer. Okay. And just going on to your earlier comments, our standards are consistent with the fire underwriter survey.
Okay.
So therefore, that's why we have that standard. And if we were to reduce that standard, then that could affect our ratings.
Okay. And because I wasn't allowed to be in here for the previous discussion, the odd variance is unlikely to affect our ratings, but if we had no standards or didn't like how often can we vary without impacting? I'm guessing I'm asking all the same questions you guys all asked already.
Keep going.
Yeah.
Your worship, I believe that, as mentioned earlier, my biggest concern is if we approve variances, there's going to be a precedent set, and then we won't be following our standards, and therefore, when the fire editor survey is reviewed, they will see that and change our ratings. Those are the concerns that staff have.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. On this picture, where the number 5590 is, there's a fire hydrant sitting on top of it. It looks like it's in the middle of the property. Is that a fire hydrant?
Your worship, that's a private hydrant?
So that does not count for the 90 meters.
That does not count for the 90 meters. Our fire hydrants are on the street. We can't guarantee that the on-site fire hydrants are being maintained. Those are the issues. And so those have to be dealt with through the NFPA. And so they have certain requirements for on-site hydrants.
Okay, so it's
and that's
different.
Based on building size.
I see. Because of the building size, they have to have a private.
Potentially, yes. I'm not familiar with all of the regulations from NFPA.
Okay, great. Thank you. Councillor Eliason?
Yes, there's been some fire instances where fire crews have showed up to a private dry well, as they call them, and the hydrant that they expected to have water in it didn't have water in it, and they couldn't put out the fire. So on this one, I'm more inclined to not look into the future, but on this map that we're looking at here, I'm inclined to look a little bit into the future and what Councillor Wallace Richmond was mentioning before, which is this one here would be a cost share and between Bowman and Dynaflex, and then I would be more lenient maybe if Dynaflex came in at a future date and said, hey, we'd like a variance on one, but on this one, which would be cost shared, would be I think it'd be less painful to everyone involved, and it would still provide that consistency which we're going to see along Auto Road with moving forward, which would up our standards. So on this one, I'd be likely to vote against the variance, knowing that it is a cost shared hydrant at this time.
Thank you. Councillor Lindgren?
Thanks. I was wondering if you could see the picture that you had up earlier of the yellow circles and how they are close to each other or far away from each other. Yeah. And where is Dynaflex on this one? And
Dynaflex, and then this is the hydrant location that we're speaking of right now.
okay.
Sorry, my mic wasn't on. This is the hydrant we're speaking of, and then this is the other location that Dynaflex would be required to install a hydrant.
Okay, and so the one private hydrant on Dynaflex is kind of irrelevant to this conversation because regardless of how much water's in it, it's not going to service the property that's requiring, or that's asking for the variance this time. So really the only one that we're concerned about is the one that's right, yep, there. Okay. If Dynaflex were to come forward with a request for a variance, I would want some sort of confirmation about what standard their private hydrant is kept to and whether or not the city has access to those records. But for this application, I don't think that's relevant.
Thank you, Councillor Lindgren. Any other comments before I call a question? Councillor Lavery.
Yes, thank you, Worship. I guess my thinking on this is similar to Councillor Eliason, so I won't go over that. I'm tending to, partly because of the standard, partly because of the cost sharing, to not accept this. I'll vote to move it forward here, but that's my thinking here right now. The overall, I guess, as we're talking about these applications of a tight standard versus reasonableness and variance, plays into my thinking, plays into as well as community welfare protection plans as well. And we have not got our CWPP in place yet, but certainly that area of fire coming down the Crown into the industrial area is of, at least from a non-forestry expertise here in my mind, is high up on the radar. So that's going to figure into my calculations as we look at these variances coming up. But I do think that on this one, each application is unique. I think it is different from the previous one we looked at, and I will likely be not in favor, but we'll talk about that at council.
Thank you. Any other comments? Could we just have this one on the screen? My sense is the same as Councillor Lavery's and Councillor Eliason's. I think this one is a little bit different, because if you look at property 5731, the hydrant that's missing is the one that's right in front of their place. Similarly, Dynaflex, the hydrant that's missing is the one that's right along their frontage on Auto Road. I don't see it as being similar or the same as the other one that we looked at. So I'm less inclined to support this one. Is there any other comments? All those in favor? Any opposed? Any opposed? Councillor Lavery, Councillor Flynn, Councillor Eliason, and myself are opposed. It will continue to go to council anyways, and so, but that'll be recorded as a planning and development vote. Those are all of our items. Council, we're going to have our photo taken here with Lana, and we're going to retire to room 100, but there is a motion to adjourn.
Moved by Councillor Wallace Richmond, seconded by Councillor Eliason, that the Development and Planning Services Committee meeting of June 17, 2019 be adjourned.
All those in favor? Thank you. Lana, where would you like to take the photo?